The funeral flowers had barely wilted when the phone calls began about selling my house. My son didn't know I had already packed my bags not for his basement, but for the Spanish villa my husband left me in secret. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. I stood in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after we buried James, watching steam rise from my untouched coffee, the ceramic mug, the one with world's best grandma that my granddaughter Sarah had given me years ago, felt foreign in my hands now. Everything felt foreign. The house, my reflection in the hallway mirror, even my own voice when I answered the relentless phone calls from my children. Mom, we need to talk about the house. Richard's voice carried that familiar tone of barely contained impatience, the same one he'd used as a teenager when asking for money. Only now, at 42, he wasn't asking. I set the mug down without taking a sip. Good morning to you too, Richard. The words came out flat, factual. Don't start with me. Jennifer and I have been discussing your situation, and frankly, it's not sustainable. This house is too big for you alone. The mortgage payments. There is no mortgage. James had paid it off 5 years ago, but I'd never mentioned that detail to the children. They'd assumed, and I'd let them. A pause, then that laugh, sharp, dismissive, the same laugh he'd inherited from his father. Though James had used it with affection, Richard wielded it like a weapon. Mom, please, Dad's pension barely covers your medications. We all know the financial strain you're under. I walked to the window above the sink, looking out at the garden James and I had tended for 32 years. The roses needed pruning. The herb garden was overgrown. Tasks that once brought us joy now stood as monuments to everything I'd lost. Your concern is touching, I said, my reflection catching in the glass. Gray hair that needed coloring, lines that had deepened in the past month. 65 years of living etched into features that still surprise me in mirrors. Don't be dramatic. Patricia agrees with me. We think you should consider moving in with one of us. Patricia agrees. My daughter hadn't called since the funeral, hadn't answered when I'd called her. When exactly did Patricia share this opinion? Another pause. I could almost see Richard running his hand through his thinning hair, a gesture he'd picked up from James. We had dinner last night as a family to discuss your options. Your options. Not our mother's future or how we can help Mom through this difficult time. My options. As if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person to be supported. I see. I opened the refrigerator, staring at the casserole dishes still stacked inside, offerings from well-meaning neighbors that I hadn't touched. And these options include selling my home. It makes financial sense. You could help Jennifer and me with our down payment. We've been looking at that colonial on Maple Street, and Patricia could use some assistance with Sarah's college fund. It's a win-win situation. I closed the refrigerator door with more force than necessary. A win-win situation. Mom, you know I didn't mean it like that. But he had meant it exactly like that. Richard had always been transparent in his selfishness, even as a child. It was almost refreshing compared to Patricia's subtle manipulations, the way she'd learned to ask for things sideways, making me feel guilty for not offering what she'd never directly requested. What did you tell your sister about my finances? I asked. Just the truth, that Dad's pension isn't enough, that the house is too much for you to handle alone, that you're probably struggling more than you're letting on. The truth, as if he knew anything about my actual circumstances, as if any of them had bothered to ask detailed questions about James's affairs, about the investments he'd made, about the modest inheritance from his mother that we'd quietly saved and grown over the years. I thought about the folder in James's desk drawer, the one I'd found while sorting through his papers. Bank statements, investment portfolios, the deed to a small villa in Marbella that he'd purchased as a surprise for our retirement. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Mom, we're not asking you to think about it. We're telling you what needs to happen. Jennifer found a buyer already. Her cousin Gregory is in real estate and he's got a client who's very interested. Cash offer. Quick closing." My hand tightened on the phone. "You found a buyer for my house. We're trying to help you. Mom, the sooner you accept that this is the best solution for everyone, the easier this transition will be." A transition as if grief were a business merger, as if the dismantling of 32 years of marriage could be reduced to paperwork and profit margins. And where exactly am I supposed to live during this transition? Well, that's what we wanted to discuss. Patricia's got that finished basement, and with Sarah away at college most of the year, there's plenty of space. You'd have your own entrance, your own bathroom. It could work out perfectly. Patricia's basement, the same basement that flooded every spring, where she stored Christmas decorations and exercise equipment she never used. The same basement where I'd been relegated during last year's Thanksgiving dinner, while the real adults ate upstairs. How generous of Patricia to offer. She's excited about it, actually. Thinks it could be good for both of you. You could help with Sarah when she's home from school. Maybe do some cooking. You know how Patricia struggles with meal planning. And of course, Patricia struggled with meal planning the same way she struggled with laundry, cleaning, and remembering to call her mother, but she excelled at delegating these struggles to others, particularly to the woman who'd raised her to be self-sufficient. "And Richard," I asked, "what role do you play in this arrangement?" "Jennifer and I will handle the house sale, obviously, the paperwork, the negotiations. We'll make sure you get a fair price." Fair, I almost laughed. Richard's definition of fairness had always been tilted in his favor, like a carnival game designed to separate fools from their money. "I need to think about this," I repeated. "Mom, there's nothing to think about. Gregory's client is serious. They want to close within the month." "A month?" They were giving me a month to dismantle the life James and I had built together, to surrender the home where we'd hosted their birthday parties and graduation celebrations, where we'd nursed them through chickenpox and heartbreak and the various crises of young adulthood. I said, "I need to think about it." "Fine, but don't take too long. Good opportunities don't wait around forever." The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone, listening to the sudden silence that seemed to echo through the empty house. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked, a car door slammed. Life continuing its normal rhythm while mine spun out of control. I walked to James's study, to the desk where he'd paid bills and planned our future for over 2 decades. I'd avoided this room since the funeral, unable to face the emptiness of his chair, the silence of his absence. But now I forced myself to enter, drawn by a memory of something I'd glimpsed while searching for insurance papers after his heart attack. The study smelled of him leather and that faint cedar cologne he'd worn for 30 years. I sat in his chair, running my fingers along the worn armrests where his hands had rested. Then I opened the bottom drawer, the one where he kept important documents. The folder was there, hidden beneath old tax returns, blue with private written across it in James's neat handwriting. I pulled it out and spread the contents across the wooden surface we'd bought at an estate sale when Richard was still in high school. Bank statements showing balances that would make my children's eyes widen. Investment portfolios that had weathered market storms and emerged stronger. And a property deed for a villa in Marbella, Spain, complete with photographs of whitewashed walls and a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean. My hands trembled as I held the photographs. James had never mentioned a house in Spain. We'd talked about traveling and retirement, maybe renting a place in Europe for a few months, but ownership, When had he done this? How had he kept it secret? Beneath the deed was a sealed envelope with my name on it. I recognized James's handwriting immediately. The careful, precise letters that reflected his methodical nature. The envelope was dated 1 year ago, with instructions to be opened by Eleanor in the event of my death. My heart pounded as I slid my finger under the seal, tearing the paper to reveal a letter written in the same careful hand. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm so sorry to have left you alone, but you're not alone in the ways that matter. I've made sure of that. First, about the house in Spain. I bought it 3 years ago after my business trip to Marbella. Remember how I couldn't stop talking about that little coastal town? How the people reminded me of the best parts of home, but with better weather. I found the villa during that trip and couldn't resist. I meant it to be a surprise for our 35th anniversary, a place where we could spend half the year watching sunsets over the Mediterranean. I'm devastated that we won't get to experience it together, but I hope you'll go there and find some peace. The villa is fully paid for. The property management company sends monthly reports, and our neighbor, Carmen Rodriguez, has been keeping an eye on things. She speaks excellent English and has been caring for the garden. Her number is in the folder. Now, about our financial situation. Eleanor, we are more than comfortable. Between my pension, our investments, and the insurance policy, you have enough to live very well for the rest of your life. The details are all in this folder. I've also set up what I call your Independence Fund, a separate account in your name, only with $75,000. I've been adding to it monthly from my personal savings. The debit card and PIN are in the small envelope. This money is yours alone, to use however you wish, without explaining or justifying to anyone. I know our children, love them though I do. I suspect they're already circling like vultures, convinced they know what's best for you. They don't. You are not a burden to be managed or a problem to be solved. You are an intelligent, capable woman who raised 2 children, supported a husband through his career changes, and managed our household with grace and wisdom for over 30 years. Don't let them convince you otherwise. The money and properties are yours to do with as you please. Keep them, sell them, give them away. It's your choice. But make that choice based on what you want, not what others expect from you. I've watched you sacrifice your own dreams for decades, always putting our family first. Now it's time to put yourself first. Go to Spain if you want. Travel the world. Write that novel you always talked about, whatever brings you joy. The children will survive without your constant sacrifice. In fact, they might even grow stronger for it. With all my love and faith in your strength, James P.S. The key to the Spanish villa is in my desk drawer behind the photo of us in Venice. Carmen next door has been tending the garden and speaks excellent English. I read the letter twice, my vision blurring at the edges. James had known. He'd seen what I was too close to recognize, that our children had learned to view my love as a resource to be exploited, rather than a gift to be treasured. I folded the letter carefully and returned to the folder. The bank statements confirmed what James had written. Our joint accounts held more than enough to maintain this house indefinitely. The investment portfolio showed consistent growth, and the Spanish villa I traced my finger over the photograph of its sun-drenched terrace, trying to imagine myself there, alone but free. My phone buzzed, a text from Patricia. Mom, Richard told me about the house. I know this is hard, but it's really for the best. Sarah's so excited about having Grandma closer. Can't wait to discuss the details. Sarah, my granddaughter, who'd spent summers with James and me, who'd learned to bake cookies in this kitchen and plant tomatoes in this garden, who'd called me every week during her first semester at college, homesick and overwhelmed, seeking comfort from the grandmother who'd always had time for her stories. When was the last time Sarah had called 2 months ago? 3. I scrolled through my phone looking for recent messages from my granddaughter. Nothing since Christmas when she'd sent a group text thanking everyone for gifts. No personal messages, no requests for advice, no updates about her classes or her boyfriend or her plans for summer break. The silence stretched around me, heavy with realization. They'd already moved on. All of them. James's death had been an inconvenience to be managed, not a loss to be mourned together, and I was simply another inconvenience, another problem requiring their efficient solution. I closed the folder and returned it to the drawer. Then I walked upstairs to my bedroom, to the closet where James's clothes still hung, still carrying the faint scent of his cologne. I pulled out a suitcase from the top shelf. It was time to start packing, but not the kind of packing Richard expected. The law office smelled of leather and old paper, a scent that reminded me of James's study, but felt infinitely more powerful. I sat across from Margaret Chen, the estate attorney James had chosen years ago, a sharp woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Williams, I have to say this is highly unusual. Margaret spread the documents across her mahogany desk, each page crisp and official. Your husband was very specific about these contingencies, but I never expected we'd need to implement them. I smoothed my black dress, the same one I'd worn to the funeral, and kept my voice steady. James always said I underestimated people's capacity for selfishness. I'm beginning to think he was protecting me from a truth I wasn't ready to see. Margaret nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of a document. The revocable trust he established gives you complete control over all assets. The children were never named as beneficiaries of the real estate, only the life insurance policy. Everything else, the house, the investments, the property in Spain belongs entirely to you. And they don't know about the Spanish property. According to James's instructions, that information was to be shared only with you and only after the initial 30-day period following his death. Margaret leaned back in her chair. He seemed to anticipate that your children might pressure you into hasty decisions. Pressure, such a polite word for what Richard had attempted. I thought about his voice on the phone yesterday, demanding rather than requesting, treating me like an incompetent child who couldn't manage her own affairs. The house sale they've arranged. Can it be stopped? You're the sole owner. No sale can proceed without your signature. If they found a buyer and are making promises, they're operating under false assumptions. Margaret's smile was thin but satisfied. James was very clear about protecting your autonomy. I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot of anxiety I'd carried since Richard's call. And the Spanish property, fully paid, legally yours. The property management company James contracted sends monthly reports. The house has been maintained and is ready for occupancy whenever you choose. Whenever you choose? When was the last time someone had spoken to me about choice rather than obligation? Margaret pulled out another folder. There's something else James wanted you to have. He left this with me to be given to you at our first meeting after his death. The envelope was cream-colored, thicker than the one I'd found in his desk. Inside was a collection of papers, investment summaries, account information, and a second letter. My Eleanor, it began. By now you've discovered the Spanish villa and learned about our financial situation. I hope these revelations have provided some comfort. There's one more thing I want to explain. The letter detailed James's concerns about our children's financial dependency, Richard's failed restaurant venture that we'd refused to fund, Patricia's habit of borrowing money she never repaid, their joint assumption that our resources existed primarily for their benefit. I've watched them take advantage of your generous heart for years, James wrote. I've seen you give and give, hoping your sacrifice would teach them responsibility, but it hasn't worked. Eleanor, they've only learned that you will always be there to catch them, no matter how reckless their choices. 3 years ago, I made a decision. I removed their names from all property deeds after Richard asked me to co-sign on that restaurant loan. I established the trust that gives you complete control, and I stopped telling them about our finances. Let them believe we were just getting by. I thought it might encourage them to stand on their own feet. I remembered the arguments about the restaurant, Richard's anger when James refused to risk our retirement savings on his sure thing. At the time, I thought James was being harsh. Now I saw it as prescient. I know this may seem deceitful, the letter continued. Perhaps it was, but I wanted to protect what we'd built together from their sense of entitlement. And more importantly, I wanted to protect you from becoming nothing more than their safety net. I folded the letter, my emotions a tangle of grief, gratitude, and a surprising anger not at James for his secrets, but at myself for not seeing what he'd seen so clearly. James left very detailed instructions, Margaret said, breaking the silence. Everything is in order for you to take whatever action you feel is appropriate. What would you do? I asked suddenly. If you were me. Margaret removed her glasses, considering. Professionally, I can't advise you beyond the legal aspects, but personally, she paused. James clearly wanted you to have the freedom to choose your own path forward. I think honoring that intention would honor him. I nodded, decisions crystallizing in my mind with surprising clarity. I need to make some arrangements. Of course. Whatever you need. As I gathered my papers, my phone buzzed with another text from Richard. Mom, Gregory needs an answer about the house by tomorrow. His client is getting impatient. I deleted the message without responding and opened the contact information for the property management company in Spain. Back at home, I moved with new purpose. In James's study, I found the key to the Spanish villa exactly where he'd said it would be, behind a photograph of us in Venice on our 25th anniversary, both of us laughing at something the photographer had said. I looked younger in the photo, but not because of fewer wrinkles or grayer hair. I looked younger because I looked genuinely happy, unguarded in a way I couldn't remember being in recent years. The brass key felt solid and promising in my palm. I slipped it into my pocket and began methodically working through my to-do list. First, I emailed the property management company in Spain, introducing myself and inquiring about the villa's condition. Then I contacted Carmen Rodriguez, the neighbor James had mentioned, explaining who I was and that I might be visiting soon. Next, I called my travel agent, an actual person I'd worked with for years. Despite Richard's insistence that online booking was more efficient. Eleanor, it's been too long, Diane exclaimed. How are you holding up? I'm ready for a change, I said simply. How quickly could you arrange a one-way ticket to Malaga? Spain, one way. I could hear the surprise in her voice. Honey, are you sure? More sure than I've been about anything in a long time. Well, let's see what we can do. When were you thinking of traveling? As soon as possible, I said, feeling a thrill of anticipation. Within the week if you can manage it. While Diane worked her magic, I began sorting through my belongings, making piles to take, to store, to give away. I was halfway through my closet when my phone rang, an international number. Mrs. Williams, this is Carmen Rodriguez. I just received your email, and I wanted to call right away. I am so sorry for your loss. James spoke of you often. Her English was accented but clear, her voice warm in a way that made my chest tight with unexpected emotion. Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. I hope it's not too much trouble, but I'm thinking about coming to Spain quite soon. Oh, no trouble at all. The house is ready. I check on it every week, and the garden is beautiful. James would be so happy to know you were coming. When were you thinking to arrive? I looked around my bedroom at the half-packed suitcases and the carefully sorted piles. Next week. I'd like to come next week. Wonderful. I will make sure everything is perfect for you. Do you need someone to meet you at the airport? That would be very helpful. Thank you. Of course. You are James's Eleanor. He talked about you every time he visited, showed me pictures of your garden in America, your grandchildren. My Eleanor will love the kitchen here, he would say. She will make it sing with life. I pressed my lips together, not trusting my voice. James had talked about me in this place I'd never seen, to this woman I'd never met. He'd imagined a future for us that death had stolen, but somehow Carmen's words made it feel real again. After we hung up, Diane called to confirm my flight Tuesday morning, 6 days away, just enough time to put my plan into action. The next morning, I called a local moving company and arranged for them to come on Tuesday. Then I opened the cardboard boxes I'd retrieved from the attic boxes containing Richard and Patricia's childhood memorabilia, trophies, report cards, yearbooks, baby clothes I'd carefully preserved. I sorted through them methodically, repacking them with labels bearing my children's addresses. My phone rang several times throughout the day. Richard, then Patricia, then Richard again. I let each call go to voicemail. Mom, we need to move forward with the house sale. Call me back immediately. Mom, Richard says you're not answering his calls. We need to discuss the basement renovations. I'm thinking a small kitchenette would make it feel more like your own apartment. Mom, this is ridiculous. Gregory's client needs an answer today. Don't make this difficult for everyone. I deleted each message without responding and continued with my preparations. In the evening, my phone rang again, this time with Sarah's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, assuming she'd been enlisted in their campaign, but something made me accept the call. Grandma, finally I've been trying to reach you all day. Hello, Sarah. I kept my voice neutral, unsure whose side she was on in this family drama. Are you okay? I've been so worried. Mom and Dad are being weird, talking about you like you're not all there anymore. Dad said something about selling your house. I sat down at the kitchen table, surprised by the genuine concern in her voice. I'm fine. Sarah, your father and mother seem to have decided I can't manage on my own anymore. That's ridiculous. You're the most capable person I know. Is that why you're not answering their calls? I don't blame you. I felt a small bloom of hope. Sarah, when was the last time we actually talked? Not texted, but had a real conversation. A pause. Too long. I'm sorry. Grandma, college has been crazy. And her voice trailed off. That's not a good excuse, is it? It's not about excuses, sweetheart. I just miss you. I miss you too. And Grandpa, I should have called after the funeral. I should have checked on you more. Mom said you needed space to grieve, that calling too much might make things harder for you. I closed my eyes, feeling a fresh wave of anger at Patricia's manipulation. Your mother was wrong. I would have loved to hear from you. Well, I'm calling now, and I want to know what's really going on with the house. Dad made it sound like you're about to be homeless if you don't take their offer. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Sarah, did your parents ever tell you that Grandpa and I paid off the mortgage 5 years ago? What? No. They keep talking about how you can't afford the payments anymore. There are no payments. The house is fully paid for. And your grandfather left me more than enough to maintain it and live comfortably. Then why are they? She stopped abruptly. Oh, they want your house money. The directness of her assessment, so free of the euphemisms her parents employed, was refreshing. It would seem so. That's That's awful. What are you going to do? I hesitated, not ready to share my Spain plans. Even with Sarah, I'm considering my options. Well, whatever you decide, don't let them bully you. And Grandma, I'm going to call more often. I promise. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, thinking about Sarah's call. It had been genuine, untainted by the agenda that colored her parents' communications. Perhaps there was hope for at least one relationship in this family. The next morning, the doorbell rang at 7 a.m. I peered through the peephole to see Richard on my porch, dressed in what he considered his power suit navy blue with a yellow tie Jennifer had chosen, and carrying a manila folder thick with what I assumed were house sale documents. I considered not answering, but this confrontation was inevitable. Better to have it on my terms, in my home, while I still had the advantage of surprise. I opened the door wearing a bright red dress James had always loved, my hair freshly styled, looking nothing like the fragile widow he expected to manipulate. Mom, what the hell? Why aren't you answering my calls? Gregory's client is ready to make an offer. We need your signature today. Good morning. Richard, would you like some coffee? I stepped aside to let him enter, my calm demeanor clearly throwing him off balance. He pushed past me into the hallway, his eyes scanning the half-packed boxes in the living room. What's going on? Why are you packing boxes? I'm sorting through some things. Spring cleaning. In March, Mom, we need to talk. This house situation is urgent. Sit down, Richard. I gestured to the kitchen table where I'd laid out coffee and the banana bread he'd always loved as a child. He remained standing, clutching his folder like a shield. I don't want breakfast. I want you to sign these papers. Richard, sit down. Something in my voice stopped him mid-sentence. He sank into a chair, watching warily as I poured coffee into his favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle he'd made in pottery class at 12. Where exactly did you tell Gregory's client the money from this house sale would go? I asked casually, sliding the mug toward him. What do you mean? I mean, did you tell them the proceeds would be split between you and Patricia? Did you calculate how much you'd each receive after paying off this mysterious mortgage you're so worried about? Richard's jaw tightened. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. Grief can cloud judgment. My judgment is perfectly clear, clearer than it's been in years. I sat across from him, meeting his gaze directly. Let me ask you something else. When you had dinner with Patricia to discuss my situation, did either of you ask how I was handling your father's death emotionally? Of course, we care about. Did you ask if I was sleeping, eating, if I needed someone to talk to, or just needed company? Did you ask what I might want to do with my life now that I'm alone for the first time in 32 years? He stared at me, the folder crinkling in his grip. Or did you spend the entire dinner calculating how much money you could extract from your father's death? That's not fair, isn't it? I pulled out my phone and opened the calculator app. Let's see. If you sold my house for the amount Gregory quoted $350,000 and split it between you and Patricia after imaginary closing costs, you'd each get about $160,000. Am I close? The color drained from his face. That's not what this is about. That's exactly what this is about. Richard, do you know what your father's actual pension pays me monthly? Mom, I don't see why $400 or $200 every month, along with his Social Security and the dividend payments from investments you know nothing about. I let the numbers sink in. Tell me again how I can't afford to keep this house. Richard stood up abruptly, the folder falling to the floor, papers spilling across the tile. You lied to us. I never lied. You assumed, and I didn't correct your assumptions. There's a difference. You let us think you were struggling. You wanted to think I was struggling. It made it easier to justify treating me like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be supported. He bent to gather the scattered papers, his movements jerky with frustration. If you don't need the money, then why didn't you say something? I watched him, this son I'd raised, this man I barely recognized anymore. Because your father asked me not to. He removed your names from our property deeds 3 years ago, after that restaurant fiasco. He thought it might teach you to stand on your own feet. Richard froze, a paper clutched in his hand. Dad did what? He protected what we built together. From you, from Patricia, from your sense of entitlement. So, you're punishing us, is that it? I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. I gestured to the boxes in the living room. You wanted my belongings distributed so they wouldn't be a burden. I'm distributing them. You wanted to handle my affairs for me. But Richard, the problem is these aren't your affairs to handle. He stood slowly, papers crumpled in his fist. Mom, be reasonable. We can work this out. Maybe you don't have to move to Patricia's. We could find you a nice apartment, something more manageable. More manageable for whom? The question hung between us like a blade. Richard's mouth opened and closed, searching for words that wouldn't incriminate him further. My phone rang. Patricia's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, I said. Put it on speaker. Richard shook his head, but I answered anyway and activated the speaker. Mom, what is going on? Richard's not answering his phone, and that Gregory person keeps calling me about some issue with the house sale. Hello, Patricia? Richard's here with me now. Richard, what's happening? Did she sign the papers? I met my son's eyes as I replied. There will be no papers to sign. The house isn't being sold. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, what do you mean it's not being sold? I mean exactly that. This is my house. Your father left it to me. I'm not selling it. But Richard said you couldn't afford. Richard was wrong about many things. Another silence, longer this time. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had that sharp edge I remembered from her teenage years. Mom, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but people are counting on this sale. I've already talked to Sarah about her having a bedroom at my house when you move in. Sarah. I looked at Richard, whose face had gone pale. Tell me, Patricia, when was the last time Sarah called me? I don't keep track of Sarah's phone calls. The last time she called me was last night, before that, Christmas break. She wanted to know if I was okay because her parents were acting strange about my mental state. Mom. Patricia, how much money have I sent Sarah over the past 2 years? No answer. $12,000, $500 a month directly to her account. Money you never mentioned to Richard when you claimed I was financially struggling. Money Sarah apparently believes comes from your sacrifice, not mine. Richard was staring at me now, his mouth slightly open. I send that money because I love my granddaughter and want her to succeed, I continued. But love isn't supposed to be invisible. Support isn't supposed to be secret. When did my family decide that my contributions only mattered when they were hidden? Patricia's voice came through the speaker, smaller now. Mom, we never meant. Yes, you did. You meant exactly this. You wanted my resources without my presence, my money without my opinions, my compliance without my autonomy. I ended the call and looked at Richard. The moving truck will be here on Tuesday to deliver your childhood belongings to your house. I suggest you make room for them. Mom, please, we can fix this. How? The question stopped him cold. I could see him searching for the right words, the magic phrase that would restore his access to my resources without requiring genuine respect or relationship. We could have dinner as a family, talk about what you really want. What I really want. I laughed, surprising myself with the sound. Richard, What I really want is to live the rest of my life surrounded by people who see me as more than a source of emergency funding. What I want is to wake up in the morning without wondering which of my children will call with their hand extended. What I want is to be missed for my company, not mourned for my money. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Richard stood awkwardly, half-gathered papers clutched in his hands, the power suit suddenly looking like a child's costume. "What are you going to do?" he finally asked. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. "I'm going to live my life, Richard. The question is, do you want to be part of it on these new terms, or not?" He looked bewildered, as if I'd suddenly started speaking a language he couldn't understand. "I need to think about this. Take all the time you need. I'll be here until Tuesday. After that, well, we'll see." As he left, I noticed he'd left the house sale documents scattered across my kitchen floor. I gathered them up and fed them one by one into the shredder, feeling lighter with each page that disappeared. The weekend passed quietly. Neither Richard nor Patricia called, though I received several texts from Sarah asking if I was okay and offering to come home from college for a visit. I assured her I was fine and suggested we talk after midterms. On Monday, I finalized my preparations. I closed out unnecessary accounts, arranged for automatic bill payments, and packed 2 suitcases with what I considered essential. The rest could be shipped later if I decided to stay in Spain longer than initially planned. I walked through each room of the house, touching familiar objects, saying goodbye to the space where James and I had built our life together. Not a permanent goodbye I wasn't selling, despite Richard's machinations, but an acknowledgement that when I returned, it would be as a different person. In the evening, I wrote 3 letters, one to Richard, one to Patricia, and one to Sarah. Each contained different information, different emotions, different hopes for our future relationship. I sealed them and placed them on the mantel where they would be easily found. Tuesday morning arrived bright and clear. The moving truck came at 7 a.m. as scheduled. 2 efficient men loading the boxes of childhood memorabilia I'd prepared. I gave them Richard's and Patricia's addresses, paid them generously, and watched them drive away with decades of preserved memories. My taxi to the airport arrived at 9. As I locked the front door, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. I was leaving the house where James and I had lived, where we'd loved, where we'd raised our family. But I was also leaving behind the weight of expectations and obligations that had slowly crushed my sense of self. The flight to Madrid was 13 hours of crystalline clarity. I sat in the window seat James had always preferred, watching the Atlantic Ocean spread beneath us like a vast promise. The woman beside me, a chatty retiree from Phoenix visiting her daughter, had tried to engage me in conversation during takeoff, but something in my expression must have warned her off. I wasn't ready for small talk or the casual intimacy of airplane confessions. I was too busy savoring the silence of my phone, turned off and stowed in my purse. For the first time in years, no one knew where I was or what I was doing. No one was making demands or assumptions about my needs. No one was planning my future without consulting me. I was, in every sense that mattered, free. As the plane began its descent into Madrid, I turned my phone back on. It immediately buzzed with notifications, missed calls, voicemails, texts. I ignored them all and opened the email app to check for a message from Carmen Rodriguez. She had confirmed she would meet me at the Malaga airport after my connecting flight. Everything was arranged. Everything was in motion. I was no longer Eleanor Williams, grieving widow and family ATM. I was becoming someone new, someone who made her own choices and set her own boundaries, someone James would have been proud of. The customs officer in Madrid was a young woman with kind eyes who stamped my passport with professional efficiency. "Purpose of visit?" she asked in accented English. "Starting over," I said. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd received from anyone under 40 in months. "Welcome to Spain, Señora." Carmen Rodriguez was waiting for me in the arrivals area at Malaga, exactly as she'd promised. She was a compact woman in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and eyes that crinkled with warmth when she smiled. She held a small sign with my name written in careful script. "Mrs. Williams, welcome, welcome." She embraced me like an old friend, and I found myself returning the hug with an intensity that surprised us both. "How was your flight? Are you tired, hungry? The house is ready for you. I made some simple food, just basics until you can shop for yourself." Her English was excellent, spoken with an accent that made everything sound musical. As we walked to her small blue Renault, she chattered about the weather, the neighborhood, the garden she'd been tending in my absence. "James, he was so proud of this house," she said as we drove through the winding streets of Marbella. "He would show me pictures on his phone. You in the kitchen in America, your grandchildren. My Eleanor will love the kitchen here," he would say. "She will make it sing with life." I pressed my lips together, not trusting my voice. James had talked about me here in this place I'd never seen, to this woman I'd never met. He'd imagined a future for us that death had stolen, but somehow Carmen's words made it feel real again. The villa took my breath away. It was smaller than our American home, but perfectly proportioned with whitewashed walls and blue shutters that caught the afternoon light. Bougainvillea spilled over the garden walls in explosions of purple and pink, and lemon trees heavy with fruit lined the stone pathway to the front door. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "James chose well," Carmen said, producing the brass key I'd brought from America. "Come, let me show you inside." The interior was cool and bright with terracotta floors and windows that opened onto a small terrace overlooking the Mediterranean. The furniture was simple but elegant, a couch the color of cream, a wooden dining table for four, built-in bookcases waiting to be filled. In the kitchen, copper pots hung from hooks, and the countertops were tiled in blues and whites that reflected the sea beyond. "I stocked the refrigerator with basics," Carmen said, opening cabinets to show me plates and glasses, olive oil and wine. "There is bread, cheese, fruit. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we explore the village together." "Yes," I nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness of this stranger who owed me nothing but had cared for my husband's dream as if it were her own. "Carmen, I can't thank you enough." "No thanks necessary. We are neighbors now." She patted my arm gently. "In Spain, neighbors are family. I live just there." She pointed through the window to a similar house 50 yards away. "So, if you need anything at all, you call me. James made me promise to take care of you." And after she left, I stood alone in my Spanish kitchen and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. I unpacked slowly, hanging my clothes in the bedroom closet, placing James's photograph on the bedside table, arranging my toiletries in the bright bathroom with its clawfoot tub and window facing the sea. Each action felt deliberate, meaningful in a way that packing boxes for Richard and Patricia had not. As the sun began to set, I poured myself a glass of the wine Carmen had left and stepped onto the terrace. The Mediterranean stretched endlessly before me, painted in shades of gold and coral by the dying light. Sailboats bobbed in the distance like white prayers, and the sound of waves against rocks below created a rhythm that seemed to match my heartbeat. My phone, forgotten in my purse, began to ring. I considered ignoring it. I'd successfully avoided all contact during my travel day, but something made me check the caller ID. Sarah, I answered on the fourth ring. Hello, Grandma. Oh my God, finally, I've been trying to reach you for days. Her voice sounded different, not the casual entitlement I'd grown used to, but something sharper, more focused. Hello, Sarah. Grandma, where are you? Mom won't tell me anything except that you had some kind of fight with her and Dad, and now you're gone. There's all this weird drama about a house sale that didn't happen, and Dad's acting like you've lost your mind. Sarah, slow down. I can't slow down. I'm furious. Do you know what I found out yesterday? I sank into one of the terrace chairs, watching the last light fade from the sky. What did you find out? You've been sending me money for college, $500 every month for 2 years. Mom told me like it was some big burden she'd been hiding to protect me. Sarah's voice cracked. But Grandma, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't I know? The pain in her voice cut through me like a blade. Your mother thought it was better. Better for who? Better for her, so she could take credit for my tuition payments. Better for Dad, so he could pretend you were poor and needed to sell your house. Sarah was crying now, ugly sobs that carried across the ocean connection. Grandma, I am so ashamed. I am so ashamed. Sarah, you have nothing to be ashamed of. Yes, I do. I let them convince me you were just this sad old lady who needed taking care of. I stopped calling because Mom said you were fragile and might get too attached if I talked to you too much. She said it was healthier to give you space to grieve. Healthier. I closed my eyes, feeling the warm Spanish breeze carry the scent of lemons and salt water. My daughter had manipulated my relationship with my granddaughter, creating distance where there should have been comfort. So I gave you space, Sarah continued, her voice getting stronger with anger. And meanwhile, you were paying my sorority dues and my textbook costs, and probably my spring break trip, and I never even thanked you. I never even asked how you were doing without Grandpa. Sarah. And now they're telling everyone you've had some kind of breakdown and disappeared. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But Grandma, you haven't had a breakdown, have you? You've just finally had enough of their bullshit. The unexpected profanity made me smile despite everything. Language, Sarah. Sorry, but am I right? I looked out at the darkening sea, at the lights beginning to twinkle in the village below. Yes, you're right. Where are you? Spain. Spain? Like the country Spain. Your grandfather bought a house here for our retirement. I'm sitting on the terrace right now, looking at the Mediterranean. A long pause, then quietly. Is it beautiful? It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen. Grandma, I need to tell you something. I need to apologize. You don't need to apologize for anything, sweetheart. You were told lies by people you trusted. That's not your fault. But I should have known. I should have called you more. Should have asked questions. I stood up, pacing the small terrace as the first stars appeared overhead. Sarah, listen to me. You're 20 years old. Your job right now is to study and grow and figure out who you want to become. It's not your job to manage family finances or decode adult manipulations. But I want to do better. I want to be better. Then be better. Call me because you miss me, not because you need something. Visit me because you enjoy my company, not because you're obligated. Love me because I'm your grandmother, not because I pay your bills. Another pause. Can I visit you in Spain? The question caught me off guard. Sarah, I don't know how long I'll be here. I don't care. I have spring break in 3 weeks. I can change my plans. Cancel that stupid Cancun trip that you probably paid for anyway, and come see you instead. I want to see Grandpa's dream house. I want to sit on that terrace and hear about your new life. Your new life? The phrase sent warmth through my chest. What would your mother say? I don't care what my mother says. She paused. Actually, that's not true. I care, but I'm not going to let what she says control my choices anymore. Sarah's voice was growing stronger, more determined. Grandma, I'm 20 years old, and I just realized I don't really know you at all. I know the version of you that they presented to me, the grandmother who bakes cookies and sends birthday cards and needs to be handled carefully. But you're not that person, are you? I thought about the woman who'd confronted Richard in her hallway, who'd systematically dismantled her children's assumptions, who'd boarded a plane to Spain with no return date. No, I said. I'm not that person at all. Good, Sarah said fiercely. I can't wait to meet the real you. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness for a long time, listening to the waves and feeling something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to tomorrow, and for the first time in years, I wasn't sacrificing for someone else's comfort. I was choosing my own. My phone screen lit up with another call, Richard. I declined it and turned the phone off completely. Whatever crisis he was manufacturing could wait until morning. Tonight was for the stars and the sea and the quiet certainty that I had made the right choice. The next day, Carmen showed me around the village, introducing me to shopkeepers and neighbors with the easy warmth of someone who belonged. We bought fresh bread from the local panaderia, vegetables from a market stall run by a weathered man named Miguel, and coffee from a tiny shop that smelled of heaven. Xuan. You must meet Isabella, Carmen insisted, leading me to a small pottery studio tucked between a bookstore and a cafe. She gives lessons twice a week. James said you might enjoy it. Isabella was a tall woman with paint-splattered hands and a smile that transformed her serious face. Eleanor Carmen has told me all about you. You must join my Thursday class. We need another American to balance out all these chatty Spaniards. I found myself agreeing, though I hadn't touched clay since Richard was in elementary school. Something about the easy acceptance in Isabella's invitation made me want to try. By the time we returned to the villa, laden with groceries and small treasures from the village shops, I felt more alive than I had in years. The Spanish sun had warmed my skin, and the conversations halting at first, then flowing more easily as I remembered long dormant Spanish from college classes had awakened my mind. I checked my phone to find 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. Richard, Patricia, Jennifer, even Gregory, the real estate agent, had somehow obtained my number. I deleted them all without reading and called Sarah. Can you really come for spring break? I asked when she answered. Already booked my ticket, she replied. I arrive on the 15th. Is that okay? It's perfect. Mom's having a fit. She says you're being selfish and irresponsible. I laughed, the sound startling me with its freedom. And what do you think? I think you're being brave, Sarah said simply. And I think it's about time. The days settled into a gentle rhythm, mornings spent walking along the beach, afternoons exploring the village or attempting watercolor paintings of the view from my terrace. Thursday pottery classes with Isabella, where my clumsy attempts at bowls made everyone laugh, including me. Evenings reading books I'd been meaning to get to for years, or simply sitting on the terrace, watching the sea change colors with the setting sun. Carmen invited me to dinner at her home, introducing me to her husband Diego and their adult children who lived nearby. They treated me like an old friend, including me in their rapid-fire Spanish conversations, slowing down when they saw my confusion, teaching me new words with patient repetition. One evening, Diego asked about my family in America. I hesitated, unsure how to explain the complexity of my situation. Carmen touched my hand gently. James told us a little, she said, about your children. Did he? I was surprised. James had always been private about family matters. Diego nodded. He worried for you, said they did not see you clearly. That's an understatement, I said, attempting a smile. In Spain, Carmen said, refilling my wine glass, we have a saying, La familia es lo que tú haces, no lo que te den. Family is what you make, not what you are given. I turned the phrase over in my mind, feeling its truth resonate. I'm trying to make something new, I admitted, but it's hard to let go of the old. Of course it is, Diego said, but sometimes letting go is the only way to hold on to yourself. That night, I dreamed of James. We were walking on the beach below the villa, his hand warm in mine. You're doing the right thing, he said. I always knew you would. I woke with tears on my face, but a lightness in my heart that felt like healing. A week later, I was shopping in the village market when my phone rang. Richard again. I'd been declining his calls daily, but something made me answer this one. Hello, Richard? Mom, his voice sounded strained. Where are you? We've been worried sick. I'm perfectly fine. As I told Sarah, I'm in Spain. Spain? What the hell are you doing in Spain? I selected a ripe tomato from the vendor's display, nodding my thanks. Living, Richard? That's what I'm doing. This isn't funny, Mom. You can't just disappear without telling anyone where you're going. I told Sarah. After you were already gone, and she won't tell us anything except that you're fine and we should leave you alone. I smiled at that. Sarah was protecting me, reversing the usual order of things. She's right, I am fine, and you should leave me alone. Mom, please, we need to talk about what happened, about the house. There's nothing to talk about. The house is mine. I'm keeping it. End of story. I could almost hear him counting to 10, a strategy James had taught him for managing his temper as a child. Fine, keep the house, but when are you coming back? I don't know. What do you mean? You don't know. You can't just stay in Spain indefinitely. What about your doctors, your prescriptions? What about family holidays? What about Sarah's graduation next year? His voice had risen with each question, the familiar note of dictating rather than discussing creeping in. I cut him off. Richard, I've been seeing a doctor here. My prescriptions are handled. As for holidays and graduations, I'll return for events that matter to me when I choose to. But Spain is my home now, at least for the foreseeable future. This is insane. You're running away because of one disagreement. I laughed, startling the fruit vendor who was watching me with curious eyes. One disagreement, Richard. You and Patricia tried to sell my house out from under me and relegate me to a basement. That's not a disagreement. That's a hostile takeover. We were trying to help. No, you weren't. You were trying to help yourselves to my assets. There's a difference. The line went quiet. When Richard spoke again, his voice was lower, controlled. Mom, I think you're still grieving. This impulsive behavior, these accusations, it's not like you. That's where you're wrong, I said, my voice steady. This is exactly like me, the real me, the me that existed before I became just your mother, the me that your father saw and loved, the me I'm rediscovering here. I don't even know what that means. I know you don't. That's part of the problem. I heard him sigh, a long exhale of frustration. Look, Patricia and I have been talking. We think it might be best if we applied for guardianship, just temporarily, until you're thinking more clearly. The tomato slipped from my hand, landing with a soft thud on the cobblestones. Guardianship. It's for your own protection. These rash decisions, this paranoia about us trying to take advantage of you, these aren't signs of someone thinking rationally. Cold anger washed through me, clearing away any lingering guilt or uncertainty. Richard, listen very carefully. If you or Patricia attempt to file for guardianship, I will contest it with every resource at my disposal. I will make public every manipulative, greedy action you've taken since your father's death. I will ensure that everyone from your colleagues to your neighbors knows exactly what kind of son you are. Mom, I am not mentally incompetent. I am not making rash decisions. I am 65 years old, in excellent health, of sound mind, and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. In fact, I'm doing a far better job of it than when I allowed you and your sister to manipulate me with guilt and obligation. That's not what we were doing. Isn't it? Tell me, Richard. If I weren't your mother, if I were just some elderly client of yours, would you have advised selling her house to finance your down payment? Would you have suggested she live in a basement while you profited from her loss? The silence that followed was answer enough. I didn't think so, I said quietly. Now, I need to finish my shopping. Give my regards to Jennifer. I hung up, my hands shaking slightly. The fruit vendor, a grandmotherly woman with kind eyes, handed me another tomato. Problemas con la familia, she asked sympathetically. Sí, I admitted. Grandes problemas. She patted my hand. Los hijos siempre piensan que saben más que sus madres. Children, they always think they know more than their mothers. I laughed, grateful for the simple understanding. Exactamente. When I returned to the villa, I called Margaret Chen, the estate attorney. I explained Richard's guardianship threat and asked what I should do. This is harassment, Margaret said firmly. But don't worry. James anticipated something like this might happen. That's why he insisted on the medical evaluations and competency documentation we filed with the trust paperwork. I'll email you copies for your records and alert our local council in Spain. Could they really do it? Get guardianship? They can try, but they won't succeed. Not with the documentation we have, and not with you clearly living independently and successfully in Spain. Courts don't grant guardianships just because adult children disapprove of their parents' choices. After we hung up, I sat on the terrace with a cup of tea, watching seagulls wheel above the water. Richard's threat had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. The idea that my own children would try to legally strip me of my autonomy was both heartbreaking and infuriating. Carmen found me there an hour later, staring unseeing at the horizon. Eleanor, are you unwell? I told her about Richard's call, the words pouring out in a jumble of English and broken Spanish. She listened without interrupting, her face growing increasingly indignant. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. These children of yours, she said, her accent thickening with emotion. They do not deserve you. They're still my children, I said wearily. Despite everything. Yes, but you are not only their mother. You are Eleanor first, a woman with her own life to live. She squeezed my hands. Now, no more sad faces. Tonight you come to dinner with us. Diego's brother is visiting from Barcelona. He is a widower, very handsome, very cultured. You will like him. Carmen, I'm not ready to... No, not like that. She waved away my protest. Just dinner, just friends. But it is good for you to meet new people. People who see you as you are now, not as they remember you. She was right, of course. That evening, surrounded by Carmen's extended family, including Diego's brother Antonio, who was indeed handsome and cultured, I felt myself relax into a different kind of belonging. These people had no expectations of me, no shared history to navigate, no roles they needed me to fulfill. I could simply be Eleanor, a woman discovering a new phase of life in a beautiful place by the sea. The next morning, my phone chimed with a text from Patricia. Mom, please call me. Richard told me about your conversation. We're really worried about you. I deleted it without responding. Another came moments later. Sarah says she's visiting you for spring break. I don't think that's a good idea until we sort this out. I typed back. Sarah is an adult. Her travel plans are her decision, not yours or mine. Three dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Finally, do you have any idea how hurtful it is that you'll talk to Sarah, but not to me or Richard? I considered ignoring this too, but something made me respond. Patricia, I'm open to talking when you're ready to have an honest conversation about your intentions regarding my house and finances. Until then, I have nothing to say. No response. I put the phone away and went to my pottery class, where the lump of clay under my hands gradually took the shape of a small, imperfect bowl that nevertheless made Isabella beam with approval. You see, she said, placing my creation on the drying shelf, it is never too late to create something new. The days passed quickly, each one bringing small discoveries. I found a bookstore with an English section and the owner, Mateo, who delighted in recommending Spanish authors in translation. I discovered a cafe where the barista remembered my order after just 2 visits. I joined Carmen's walking group that met at dawn to trek along the coastal path before the heat of the day set in. And slowly, I began to write. Just a journal at first, recording my impressions of this new life, then memories of James, of our early years together before children complicated our relationship. The writing was halting, amateur, but it felt important somehow capturing these thoughts before they faded. 3 weeks after my arrival in Spain, I stood at the Malaga airport watching travelers stream through the arrivals gate. And then there she was, Sarah, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing faded jeans and a simple white t-shirt, so different from the polished college student I remembered from Christmas photos. Grandma, she dropped her backpack and ran toward me. I found myself caught up in an embrace that felt nothing like the perfunctory hugs I'd grown accustomed to at family gatherings. This was desperate, grateful, real. Let me look at you, I said, holding her at arm's length. She was thinner than I remembered, but there was something solid about her presence that hadn't been there before. You look amazing, she said, studying my face with the same intensity. Like, actually amazing. You're tan. Your hair, did you cut it? I touched the shorter style Isabella had convinced me to try at her favorite salon in town. Just a trim. It's perfect. You look, She paused, searching for words. You look like yourself. During the drive to Marbella, Sarah pressed her face to the passenger window like a child, exclaiming over olive groves and whitewashed villages, asking questions about everything we passed. Her enthusiasm was infectious, reminding me of James's wonder during our few international trips together. This is it, I said as we pulled into the driveway of the Spanish villa. Your grandfather's dream. Sarah stood in the garden for a long moment, taking in the bougainvillea, the lemon trees, the terrace where I'd spent hours reading and writing. Then she turned to me with tears in her eyes. He knew, didn't he? He knew you'd need this place. I think he did. That first evening, we sat on the terrace sharing paella that Carmen had insisted on preparing for Sarah's arrival. The older woman had fussed over my granddaughter like she was her own, and I watched Sarah respond with the natural warmth that had been missing from her interactions with her parents. Tell me about your life here, Sarah said, settling into the chair beside mine as the sun began to set. I want to know everything. So I told her about the morning walks through the village where shopkeepers had learned my name and preferences, about the Spanish lessons with Miguel, the retired professor who lived down the street, about the pottery classes and the bowl I'd made that was now glazed and sitting proudly on the kitchen counter. You're taking pottery classes, Grandma. That's incredible. I had no idea you wanted to do that. I didn't know either until I had the chance to try it. I told her about Carmen and Diego, about the walking group, about my tentative attempts at writing again. You're writing. Sarah's eyes widened. What are you writing? Just memories, for now. Stories about your grandfather and me, about my life before I became your grandmother. I want to read them. I laughed. They're not very good. I don't care. Sarah's face was earnest in the fading light. I want to know who you were, who you are. The honesty in her voice moved me. Maybe when I've written more. I promised. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Mom called me yesterday. I tensed, but Sarah held up a hand. She tried to convince me not to come, said you were having some kind of breakdown and that seeing me might make it worse. She shook her head in disgust. She said I was being selfish, coming here instead of spending spring break with the family. What did you tell her? I told her that maybe it was time for someone in our family to be selfish on your behalf. Sarah's voice carried an edge of steel I'd never heard before. Again. And then I asked her point blank if you're having a breakdown. Why haven't any of them come to check on you? Why haven't they called you directly instead of talking about you like you're a problem to be managed? What did she say? Nothing. She couldn't answer because the answer would have revealed the truth that they don't actually care about your well-being. They care about their access to your resources. The bluntness of it should have hurt, but instead it felt like vindication. Sarah, I need you to understand something, I said carefully. I don't expect you to choose sides in this. Richard and Patricia are your family too. No, Sarah's voice was firm. They chose sides when they decided to use me as a weapon against you, when they let me believe you were poor and fragile while you were paying my bills, when they tried to isolate you from the people who might actually support you. She leaned forward in her chair. Grandma, I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I realized something. They didn't just lie to you about your finances. They lied to me about you. What do you mean? They convinced me you were this fragile old lady who needed to be protected from too much excitement or emotion. They said calling you too often might make you dependent, that I should give you space to grieve. But that was never about protecting you, was it? It was about controlling the narrative. I stared at my granddaughter, amazed by her clarity. They wanted me isolated so you'd be desperate enough to accept their terms. Sarah continued, and they wanted me distant so I wouldn't witness what they were doing to you. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Do you know what the worst part is? It almost worked. I almost became the kind of person who could ignore her grandmother's loneliness because it was convenient. But you didn't become that person, only because you forced the truth into the open. If you hadn't left, if you hadn't made them show their real faces, Sarah shook her head. I might have gone my whole life never knowing who you really are. We sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead. Finally, Sarah spoke again. Can I stay longer than a week? The question surprised me. What about school? I talked to my professors before I left. I can do independent study for the rest of the semester, write papers, take exams online. She paused. I don't want to go back yet. I want to spend real time with you. Time that isn't measured in holiday visits or phone calls with agendas. Sarah, your education will still be there when I'm ready for it. But this chance, this time with you, I might not get it again. She looked at me with James's eyes, steady and determined. Grandma, I'm 20 years old, and I just realized I've never had a real conversation with you. All my life, you've been the person who remembers birthdays and sends care packages and shows up to family events with homemade desserts. But I don't know what makes you laugh, or what you dream about, or what you were like before you became our grandmother. And you want to know those things. I want to know everything. The next morning, Sarah joined me for my daily walk through the village. She charmed Mateo at the bookstore with her attempts at Spanish, helped Carmen deadhead roses in the garden, and listened with rapt attention as Miguel told stories about his years teaching literature at the University of Madrid. Your grandmother, she has the soul of a writer, he told Sarah at the cafe where I'd become a regular. She sees details others miss, understands the weight of small moments. She's always been like that, Sarah said, looking at me with new appreciation. I just never paid attention before. That afternoon, we drove to a small beach I discovered the week before, a hidden cove accessible only by a winding path through pine trees. Sarah spread a blanket on the sand while I unpacked the picnic lunch we'd assembled together. Grandma, can I ask you something personal? I looked up from the sandwiches. Of course. Are you ever going back? The question I'd been avoiding, even in my own thoughts. I don't know. But you could stay here permanently legally. I mean, James researched it thoroughly. I have residency options, health care, everything I'd need. I handed her a sandwich and settled beside her on the blanket. Why do you ask? Because I think you should stay. The certainty in her voice surprised me. Sarah, I think you should stay, and I think you should let Mom and Dad figure out their own lives without expecting you to fund their mistakes or validate their choices. Sarah took a bite of her sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. And I think I should transfer to a university here. What? There are American programs in Madrid, Barcelona, even here in Malaga. I could finish my degree in international studies, become fluent in Spanish, maybe learn about a different way of living. She looked out at the Mediterranean, her expression thoughtful. Or maybe I could take a gap year, work with Isabella at her pottery studio, help you with your writing, figure out who I am when I'm not performing for an audience. Sarah, that's a huge decision. So was getting on a plane to Spain. So was cutting your hair and taking pottery classes and refusing to sell your house. Sarah turned to face me fully. Grandma, for my entire life, I've been making decisions based on what other people expected from me, what Mom wanted, what my professors wanted, what my sorority sisters thought was appropriate. But sitting here with you, I feel like I'm seeing clearly for the first time. What do you see? I see that you're not the fragile old lady they painted you as. You're probably the strongest person I know. And I see that I don't want to be the kind of person who abandons someone I love because it's convenient. Sarah's voice grew stronger. I want to be the kind of person who shows up, who chooses love over comfort, truth over convenience. Sarah, your mother will never forgive me if I let you derail your life. This isn't derailing my life. This is saving it. Sarah grabbed my hands, her grip warm and sure. Grandma, I was sleepwalking through college, going through the motions because it was expected. But I'm awake now, and I want to spend my awakeness with someone who sees me as more than a project to be managed. That evening, we called her university together and arranged for Sarah's temporary leave of absence. Then we called Isabella to ask about the pottery studio apprenticeship she'd mentioned. Finally, with the Spanish sun setting behind us and the sound of waves providing a soundtrack to our conversation, Sarah made one last call to her mother. Mom, it's Sarah. I'm extending my stay in Spain. She listened for a moment, her face hardening. No, I'm not having a breakdown. I'm having a breakthrough. I could hear Patricia's voice, high and strained, through the phone. I understand you're angry, Sarah continued, but I'm 20 years old, and I get to decide how I spend my time. More angry sounds from the phone. Actually, Mom, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm choosing Grandma because she's the only person in our family who's ever treated me like I matter more than what I can provide. Sarah ended the call and turned off her phone. Any regrets? I asked. She smiled, James's smile, full of quiet determination. Just one, that it took me 20 years to figure out where I belonged. As we sat together on my Spanish terrace, watching the stars emerge over the Mediterranean, I realized that my story of loss had become a story of finding. I'd lost the illusion of family that demanded my diminishment, but I'd found the reality of family that celebrated my strength. The future stretched before us, uncertain but full of possibility. I didn't know if Richard and Patricia would ever understand the choices I'd made. I didn't know if Sarah would stay in Spain for a month or a year or longer. I didn't know if I would ever return to the house in America where James and I had raised our family. But for the first time since James's death, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. 1 month stretched into 2, then 3. Spring blossomed into summer, bathing the Spanish coast in golden light. Sarah flourished in ways I'd never anticipated, her natural warmth and curiosity making her a favorite in the village. Isabella took her on as an apprentice at the pottery studio, teaching her techniques I could only admire from afar with my less skilled hands. "Your granddaughter has a gift," Isabella told me one afternoon as we watched Sarah help a young boy shape his first bowl. "She connects with people through her art." "I never knew," I admitted. "Her parents pushed her toward business and economics. I'm not sure they even knew she was interested in art." Isabella shrugged in that distinctly Spanish way. "Sometimes we need distance to discover who we truly are." Distance? It had given both Sarah and me the space to become ourselves. I'd continued my writing, filling notebooks with memories and observations. Carmen had introduced me to her book club, and they'd convinced me to read some of my work aloud, a terrifying experience that somehow left me wanting to write more. Sarah and I had fallen into a comfortable routine, and mornings together, afternoons pursuing our separate interests, evenings on the terrace sharing the day's discoveries. We cooked together, experimenting with local ingredients, laughing at our failures and celebrating our successes. Sometimes Carmen and Diego joined us, or Isabella, or Miguel and his wife Luisa. Our table grew lively with conversation in mixed English and Spanish. A new kind of family forming around shared meals and genuine affection. The calls and messages from Richard and Patricia had dwindled over time. Richard sent formal emails once a week, stiff and businesslike, updating me on practical matters like mail forwarding and home maintenance. Patricia had stopped communicating entirely after Sarah's decision to stay, her silence a pointed accusation. I tried not to let it hurt. I tried to focus on the life I was building, on the joy I found in simple pleasures, on the pride I felt watching Sarah discover her own path. But sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet and the memories came unbidden, I wondered if the price of my freedom had been too high. "You're thinking about them again," Sarah said one evening, finding me on the terrace with tears on my cheeks. "I'm sorry." I wiped my face hastily. It's your father's birthday tomorrow. I always made his favorite chocolate cake, even after you were all grown." Sarah sat beside me, taking my hand. "You're allowed to miss them. Grandma, missing them doesn't mean you were wrong to leave." "I know, but sometimes I wonder if I could have handled things differently, if there was a way to make them understand without such a dramatic break." "There wasn't." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "They weren't listening. They didn't want to understand. They wanted compliance." I nodded, knowing she was right, but still feeling the ache of separation. "Your mother hasn't responded to any of my emails." "I know. She hasn't responded to mine either." This surprised me. "You've been emailing her. Every week, just updates about what I'm doing. Invitations to visit if she wants to. No responses yet, but I keep trying." Sarah squeezed my hand. "I'm not giving up on them. Grandma, I'm just not letting them dictate my choices anymore." Her maturity humbled me. At 20, Sarah had found a balance I was still struggling with at 65, holding space for family while holding firm to her own boundaries. The following week, I received an unexpected email from Margaret Chen, the estate attorney. Mrs. Williams, I wanted to inform you that Richard came to my office yesterday asking about the legal status of your Spanish residency and whether it affected your ownership of the American property. I assured him that your residency choices have no bearing on your property rights. He seemed disappointed by this information, but did not pursue the guardianship threat. I believe he's accepted that you are competent to make your own decisions, even if he disagrees with them. He also asked if I had contact information for you beyond your email. I did not provide any additional details, as per your instructions. However, he left a letter for you, which I've scanned and attached to this email. I'll keep the original in your file unless you request otherwise. Best regards, Margaret Chen. I stared at the email for a long time before opening the attachment. Richard's letter was typed on his business stationery, formal and precise. Dear Mother, I hope this letter finds you well. It has been 4 months since your departure for Spain, and while I cannot say I understand or approve of your decision, I must acknowledge that you appear to be managing your affairs competently. Jennifer and I have purchased a smaller home than the one we initially considered on Maple Street. It is well within our budget without requiring any assistance. Patricia has also secured additional financial aid for Sarah's education, though I understand from your emails that Sarah is currently not attending classes. The purpose of this letter is to inquire about your long-term intentions regarding the family home. If you plan to remain in Spain indefinitely, would you consider allowing Patricia and her family to live in the house? They would pay rent, of course, and maintain the property to your standards. This arrangement would benefit both parties, providing you with income from an otherwise empty property and giving Patricia's family more space than their current home allows. I want to assure you that I have reflected on our last conversation. While I still believe we acted with your best interests at heart, I can see how our approach might have seemed presumptuous. For that, I apologize. Please consider my proposal regarding the house and let me know your thoughts. Respectfully, Richard. No mention of missing me. No questions about my life in Spain. No acknowledgement of the pain he'd caused. Just a new, more carefully worded attempt to gain access to my resources. I closed the email without responding and went for a long walk along the beach, letting the rhythm of the waves calm my thoughts. When I returned, Sarah was in the kitchen making gazpacho, the Spanish cold soup she'd become expert at preparing. Everything okay? She asked, noting my expression. Your father sent a letter through Margaret. He wants to know if Patricia's family can rent our house in America. Sarah snorted. Let me guess. He phrased it as doing you a favor, right? So the house won't sit empty. Something like that. Are you going to let them? I leaned against the counter, watching her chop tomatoes with practiced ease. I don't know. It might be practical, but it also feels like opening a door I deliberately closed. Well, if you do consider it, make sure the agreement is ironclad. Business only, with real market rate rent and clear expectations. Sarah added garlic to the blender. Don't let them turn it into another way to manipulate you. I smiled at her protectiveness. When did you get so wise about these things? I've been paying attention. She pulsed the blender, then poured the bright red soup into bowls. Also, Isabella's ex-husband tried to claim half her studio after their divorce, so she's taught me a lot about protecting what's yours. We took our gazpacho to the terrace, settling into the ritual of our evening meal as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. I've been thinking, Sarah said after a while, about going back to school. My heart sank a little. As much as I knew she should continue her education, I'd grown accustomed to having her here. Oh, not in America, she clarified quickly. Seeing my expression, There's a program at the University of Malaga, international business with a focus on arts management. Isabella thinks it would be perfect for me, combining my interest in pottery with practical skills. Relief and pride mingled in my chest. That sounds wonderful, Sarah. It's just part-time to start, so I can keep working with Isabella, and it's only a 20-minute drive from here. She looked at me hopefully. So I could still live with you, if that's okay. Of course it's okay. My voice caught on the words. This is your home for as long as you want it to be. Her smile was worth every difficult moment of the past months. I was thinking we could convert that small room off the kitchen into a studio space. For both of us, your writing, my pottery. Carmen says her nephew is good with renovations. I'd like that. Later that night, I composed a response to Richard's letter. Richard, thank you for your letter. I'm glad to hear you and Jennifer have found a suitable home. Regarding the house in America, I am not interested in renting it to Patricia's family at this time. I return periodically to check on things and prefer to keep it available for my use. The property management company I've hired is maintaining it well in my absence. As for Sarah, she has indeed paused her American education, but she will be enrolling in the University of Malaga this fall, studying international business with arts management. She has discovered a talent for pottery and is apprenticing at a local studio. She seems happier and more purposeful than I've ever seen her. I appreciate your acknowledgement that your approach to my living situation was presumptuous. However, I notice that your apology focuses on approach rather than intent. This distinction matters to me. I am building a good life here. I have friends, interests, and a sense of community. I have not ruled out returning to America permanently someday. But for now, Spain is where I need to be. If you and Patricia truly wish to repair our relationship, I remain open to that possibility, but only on terms that respect my autonomy and recognize me as a person with value beyond what I can provide to you financially. I hope you are well. Mom, I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my computer and went to bed. For the first time in weeks, I slept without dreams of the past, anchored instead in the present I was creating. A week later, my phone rang with an international number I didn't recognize. Hello, Mrs. Williams. This is Gregory Wilson, Jennifer's cousin, the real estate agent. I nearly hung up, but curiosity kept me on the line. Yes, Mr. Wilson. What can I do for you? Well, this is awkward, but I wanted to apologize for my role in what happened with your house. I didn't realize at the time that you weren't on board with the sale. Richard led me to believe you were just hesitant about the transition. His honesty surprised me. I see. Thank you for clarifying that. The thing is, Mrs. Williams, I'm not calling just to apologize. I'm calling because I have a client who's very interested in purchasing property in Marbella, and Richard mentioned you'd relocated there. I laughed, the sound echoing in my kitchen. So Richard suggested you try to sell my Spanish home now instead. What? No, nothing like that. Gregory sounded genuinely shocked. My clients are looking to buy in your area, and I thought you might recommend a local agent. Since you're living there now, you probably know the market. Oh, my suspicion had been unfair. I apologize for jumping to conclusions. Mr. Wilson? No need. I understand why you might be wary. He paused. For what it's worth, Richard seems different these days, more reflective. Whatever happened between you has made an impact. After I gave Gregory Carmen's cousin's contact information, he was the best real estate agent in Marbella. I sat at the kitchen table, turning over his comment about Richard, more reflective. Could people really change, or was this just another strategy to regain my trust and, with it, access to my resources? Summer faded into fall, and Sarah began her university classes. She would return from Malaga bubbling with new ideas, sharing stories about her professors and classmates, bringing a youthful energy to our quiet villa. I continued my writing, joining a workshop led by an English expatriate who had published several novels. Under her guidance, my meandering memories began to take shape as a cohesive narrative. You should consider publishing, she told me after reading a chapter about my early days with James. Your voice is authentic, and your perspective on marriage and motherhood is refreshingly honest. Publishing. The idea had never occurred to me. I'm not a real writer. What is a real writer except someone who writes? She handed back my pages. Think about it. There are plenty of small presses that would be interested in a memoir like this. The seed was planted, and I found myself writing with new purpose, shaping my scattered reflections into something others might connect with. The small room off the kitchen had indeed been transformed into a studio space, with a desk and comfortable chair for me on one side, and a small pottery wheel and shelves for Sarah's creations on the other. We worked there together in companionable silence, each pursuing our art in our own way. In October, 6 months after my arrival in Spain, I received an email from Patricia, the first direct communication since our confrontation. Mom, Sarah tells me she's enrolled at the University of Malaga. I wish she had consulted me before making such a significant decision, but I suppose at 20, she's entitled to her independence. She speaks highly of your life there. It sounds like you've both found something meaningful. I'm writing because Thanksgiving is approaching. The children have been asking about you, especially Grandma's pumpkin pie. I know international travel is complicated, but if you were planning to visit, we would have a place for you at our table. Patricia. No apology, no acknowledgement of her role in our estrangement, but an invitation, however stilted, to rejoin the family circle. I showed the email to Sarah when she returned from class. Are you going to go? She asked. I don't know. What do you think? She considered, tapping her fingers on the countertop. I think it's a peace offering. In her own way, Mom's never been good at admitting when she's wrong. That's true. I smiled, remembering Patricia as a stubborn child, so different from compliant Richard. She gets that from me, I'm afraid. If you want to go, I'll come with you, Sarah offered. Moral support? The thought of facing the family gathering alone had been daunting. With Sarah beside me, it felt possible. Are you sure it might be uncomfortable? Grandma, uncomfortable is watching your mother and grandmother pretend to be strangers because they're both too proud to make the first move. Sarah hugged me impulsively. Besides, I miss Thanksgiving food. Carmen's cooking is amazing, but it's not the same as sweet potato casserole. I laughed, hugging her back. You make a compelling argument, I replied to Patricia's email that evening. Patricia, thank you for the Thanksgiving invitation. Sarah and I would like to accept. We'll arrange our own accommodations to avoid imposing, but we would be happy to join you for the meal. Let me know what time and if there's anything specific I can bring. Looking forward to seeing the children. Mom. Short, practical, without emotional overtures either way. A beginning, perhaps, but a cautious one. The flight back to America felt strange after so many months away. The familiar sights of my hometown seemed both welcoming and foreign, like returning to a place I'd only visited in dreams. Sarah and I checked into a hotel rather than staying at my house or Patricia's neutral territory that gave us space to retreat if necessary. The morning of Thanksgiving, I woke early, jet lag still disrupting my sleep patterns. I slipped out while Sarah still slumbered, driving the rental car through quiet streets to my old house. The property management company had maintained it well, the lawn neatly trimmed, the flower beds mulched for winter, the windows clean and gleaming in the morning light. I used my key to enter, half expecting it to feel like home again. Instead, it felt like visiting a museum dedicated to my former life. Everything was as I'd left it, but without the energy of daily living. It seemed staged rather than inhabited. I walked through each room slowly, touching familiar objects, remembering moments large and small that had shaped my life here. In James's study, I sat in his chair and opened the drawer where I'd found the Spanish villa documents. The folder was still there, though I'd taken the most important papers with me. I ran my fingers over his handwriting on the label "Private" and smiled at the memory of his secretive nature. "I'm doing okay, James," I whispered to the empty room. "We're doing okay." I locked up and drove to Patricia's house, arriving precisely at the agreed-upon time with 3 pumpkin pies in hand, my traditional contribution to Thanksgiving dinner. Sarah met me there, having taken an Uber from the hotel while I was visiting the house. "Ready?" she asked, taking one of the pie carriers from my hands. "As I'll ever be." Patricia answered the door looking exactly as she always had: perfectly styled hair, carefully applied makeup, a festive but elegant sweater. Only the tightness around her eyes revealed any tension. "Mom, Sarah, you made it." She stepped aside to let us enter. "Everyone's in the living room." Everyone turned out to include Richard and Jennifer, their 2 teenage sons, Patricia's husband Tom, and their younger children, 12-year-old Emma and 8-year-old Jacob. The room fell silent as we entered, all eyes turning to assess the prodigal mother and daughter. Jacob broke the tension, running across the room to fling himself at Sarah. "Cousin Sarah, did you bring me something from Spain? Mom said you live in Spain now with dragons." Sarah laughed, swinging him up into a hug. "No dragons in Spain, buddy, but I did bring you something." She pulled a small ceramic figure from her purse, a knight she'd made herself, glazed in bright colors. "A Spanish knight to protect you from imaginary dragons." Jacob's delight seemed to loosen something in the room. Emma approached more cautiously to inspect Sarah's gift, then offered a shy smile. Richard's sons, now lanky teenagers more interested in their phones than family drama, mumbled greetings without looking up. Richard himself stood awkwardly by the fireplace, looking thinner than I remembered. "Mom, you look well." His voice was formal, but not unkind. "Thank you, Richard. So do you." Jennifer stepped forward, her social graces overriding any personal feelings. "Eleanor, it's good to see you. Can I take your coat? Get you something to drink?" The initial awkwardness gradually eased as the familiar rhythms of holiday preparation took over. I found myself in the kitchen with Patricia, arranging appetizers on serving trays while she checked the turkey. "Your pies look perfect," she said, breaking a silence that had stretched too long. "The kids have been talking about them for weeks." "It's an easy recipe. I could teach you sometime." Patricia's hand stilled on the baster. "I'd like that." She didn't look at me, but her voice had softened. "Sarah says you're writing now." "Just memoirs, nothing serious." "She's being modest," Sarah interjected, entering with empty glasses to refill. "Her writing group thinks she should publish." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Publish like a real book." "Maybe a collection of essays," I said, embarrassed by Sarah's enthusiasm. "It's just a hobby." "Mom never had hobbies before," Patricia said to Sarah, as if I weren't present. "She was always too busy taking care of everyone else." There was something in her tone I couldn't quite identify. Resentment, guilt before I could analyze it. Jacob burst into the kitchen announcing that he was starving to actual death. And the moment passed. Dinner itself was a masterpiece of polite conversation. We discussed safe topics, the children's activities, the mild fall weather, Sarah's university program. No one mentioned my abrupt departure for Spain, the attempted house sale, or the months of strained communications. It was as if we'd all tacitly agreed to pretend the rift had never happened until dessert. "So, Mom," Richard said as I served slices of pumpkin pie, "have you decided how long you're staying in Spain?" The table went quiet, forks pausing midair. "I don't have a specific timeline," I replied carefully. "I'm enjoying my life there." "But you'll come back eventually, right?" Patricia pressed. "I mean, Spain is nice for a vacation, but it's not really home." Sarah tensed beside me, but I placed a hand on her arm. "Actually, Patricia, it has become home in many ways. I have friends there, activities I enjoy, a community that values me." "We value you," Richard objected. I met his gaze steadily. "Do you, as a person, or as a resource?" Jennifer intervened smoothly. "Who wants coffee with their pie, or perhaps some whipped cream?" But Richard wasn't ready to let it go. "That's not fair. Mom, we were worried about you living alone in that big house. We wanted to help." "By selling my home without my consent and relegating me to Patricia's basement." The words came out sharper than I intended. The children were watching now, eyes wide at the adults' conflict. Patricia's husband, Tom, cleared his throat. "Maybe this isn't the best time." "No, it's exactly the right time," I said firmly. "We're all together, and we've spent the entire day pretending that nothing happened. But something did happen, something important." I looked around the table at my family, Richard's averted eyes, Patricia's tight lips, the confused expressions of the grandchildren, Sarah's encouraging nod. "I don't want to ruin Thanksgiving," I continued more gently. "But I also don't want to pretend that we can just go back to the way things were without addressing what went wrong." "Nothing went wrong," Patricia insisted. "You overreacted to a reasonable suggestion." Sarah made a sound of disbelief, but I squeezed her arm again. "Patricia, your suggestion wasn't reasonable. It was self-serving. Both of you, I included Richard in my gaze, saw my grief as an opportunity to profit financially. When I resisted, you tried to convince me I was mentally incompetent." "That's not what happened," Richard protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "That's exactly what happened," Sarah said quietly. "And you know it." A heavy silence fell over the table, broken only by 8-year-old Jacob's stage whisper. "Is Grandma mad at everybody? Despite everything?" I had to smile. "No, Jacob, I'm not mad. I'm just trying to be honest. Families should be honest with each other, even when it's hard." He nodded solemnly. "Like when I broke Mom's vase and blamed the cat." A ripple of laughter eased the tension slightly. "Exactly like that," I agreed. "The truth might get you in trouble sometimes, but hiding it usually makes things worse." I turned back to the adults. "I'm not here to assign blame or demand apologies. I'm here because, despite everything, we're family. But if we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, it needs to be based on respect and honesty. I won't be treated as an accessory to your lives or a convenience to be managed. I'm a person with my own needs, desires, and right to self-determination." "So you're never coming back?" Patricia said flatly. I didn't say that. I said I don't have a timeline. Spain is my home now, but this will always be part of me too. I gestured around the table. "You are all part of me. I just need you to see me clearly." Richard was staring at his plate, jaw working. Finally, he looked up. "I'm sorry, Mom. Not just for how we approached things, but for the assumptions behind it. You're right, we didn't see you clearly. Maybe we never have." His unexpected candor brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Richard." Patricia remained silent, her expression unreadable, but she didn't object to Richard's apology, which seemed like progress of a sort. The rest of the evening unfolded with less tension, though not with complete ease. As Sarah and I prepared to leave, Patricia approached me at the door. "You're writing. she said abruptly. Is it, is it about us, about the family? Some of it, I admitted. It's about my life, so naturally you're part of that story. She nodded, looking uncomfortable. If it ever does get published, would you let me read it first, before strangers do? I recognized the request for what it was, not an attempt to censor, but a desire to understand how I saw our shared past. Yes, I would do that. Thank you. And she hesitated, then added, the invitation to Thanksgiving wasn't just from me. The kids really have been asking about you. Jacob prays for his Spanish grandma every night. The simple statement touched me deeply. Thank you for telling me that. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet, but there was a moment of connection that felt like a small bridge being built across a wide divide. In the car, Sarah exhaled loudly. Well, that was intense. Yes, it was. I started the engine, feeling emotionally drained but oddly lightened. Was it terrible? Actually, no. Sarah sounded surprised by her own assessment. It was real. For once, people said what they meant instead of what they thought they should say. Not Patricia. Mom never says what she means directly, but she asked to read your writing. That's her way of trying to understand. I glanced at my granddaughter, marveling at her insight. When did you get so wise about people? She smiled, James's smile. I had good teachers. We flew back to Spain 3 days later, after a brief visit to my house and a more relaxed dinner with just Richard and Jennifer. Patricia had texted to say goodbye, pleading a sick child, but the message included a photo of Jacob holding the ceramic knight Sarah had given him, with the caption, already asked for Spanish lessons for Christmas. As our plane climbed above the clouds, I felt the distance between my two lives not as a painful tearing, but as a widening perspective that allowed me to see both more clearly. Do you think things will be different now? Sarah asked, looking out at the endless sky. I think they already are, I replied. Not perfect, not completely healed, but different. And different is a start. Back in Spain, Carmen welcomed us with a festive dinner, eager to hear about our American Thanksgiving adventure. As we sat around her table, sharing stories and laughter with these people who had become our chosen family, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. Later, alone on my terrace under a canopy of stars, I thought about the chapters I'd been writing, the story of a woman who lost herself in the roles of wife and mother, who had to lose everything to find herself again. But that wasn't the whole story anymore. Now there were new chapters forming about reconciliation without compromise, about holding space for difficult people while maintaining boundaries, about creating a life of one's own design at any age. James had given me the gift of this house, this new beginning, but the life I was building here that was my own creation. And for perhaps the first time, I was truly proud of myself, not for what I'd given to others, but for what I'd finally claimed as my own, my voice, my choices, my authentic self. The Mediterranean whispered below, constant and ever-changing, like the woman I was becoming. Tomorrow would bring pottery class with Isabella, lunch with Miguel to discuss Spanish literature, an evening writing session in the studio I shared with Sarah. Simple pleasures that added up to a rich, purposeful existence. I raised my glass to the stars, to James, to the winding path that had led me here. Gracias, I whispered in my improving Spanish, for everything. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and make sure to subscribe to hear 2 other stories that are channel favorites.